believe that it's very important to put the community together and then learn together. I think the slogan here is meet, learn, and improve. I would say that this is an industry-driven initiative.
Starting with the need for a reliable map. And I think it's quite important to always mention this also to our international audience. It's about space, about land in Singapore, which we don't have a lot of, but also by going vertical, of course. And many of the things that you see here are already in place in Singapore underground, and Singapore has ambitions to make this a lot more in the near future.
So, in general, at this moment, yes, all the data is stored in a database owned by the municipality of Rotterdam. And we want to include nationwide data sets through streaming data. And there are areas where people just say, well, I pay taxes, so municipality, you know what to do, just do it and don't bother us with all your ideas and questions, to just do your job.
Starting with the need for a reliable map. And I think it's quite important to always mention this also to our international audience. It's about space, about land in Singapore, which we don't have a lot of, but also by going vertical, of course. And many of the things that you see here are already in place in Singapore underground, and Singapore has ambitions to make this a lot more in the near future. This also leads to certain challenges. Right? The space is already congested. We're going to put more underground. And for those people that have to plan for it, that have to manage the land, but also the guys that have to eventually develop it, that's going to pose some huge challenges. And for that, we say we need reliable data to tell us what is where and what space it occupies. For urban planning, we believe reliable data leads to more efficient planning processes and better decisions. Right? In the case of Singapore, we often talk about opportunity of land or the loss of it if you don't properly organize your space up front. We see a lot of value for reliable data when it comes to the administration of land. As you are probably quite aware, most of the land in Singapore is owned by the state, by the government, and as such, it has a huge task in administering and managing that space. And of course, we do have to address the issue of developing things above the ground, but also underground. And this is actually probably the most well-documented value of underground information. We know quite well how much it costs if you are not able to properly locate a utility that you know is going to be there. We know from overseas quite well the cost savings, the benefits that capturing reliable data upfront in the design phase will deliver. And we know that if you do so happen to hit a utility during your excavation works, for example, this is going to be a bit expensive to fix whatever the pipe or the cable that you damaged, but the total cost, the indirect costs that are involved with such a utility strike are magnitudes higher. So when we look at the state in Singapore, when we started at the end of 2017, the utility survey standards had just been released and are now basically mandated for all newly built utilities in Singapore. This so far only covers newly built utilities which are built using an open trench, which means they are accessible and you have a line of sight. The purpose was to develop a roadmap, a broad set of recommendations towards establishing a reliable, meaning an accurate, up-to-date and complete map of subsurface utilities for the purposes of land administration and planning through a mix of course, road mapping activities, deep analysis of what was the state of utility mapping in Singapore through interviews by going on site sometimes, and also doing various case studies with promising technology for updating the quality of existing data. We looked at utility mapping in Singapore We also covered newly built utilities because we weren't sure if it was already going as good as the contracts tell us it should be. We went outside those case studies, right? We starting off with let's call them low-end ground penetrating radar devices to see exactly how deep we could see in Singapore, how accurate the results that we could extract could be. But we also went to the whole other end of the spectrum, right? The big device, which doesn't have just one antenna that you saw, but about 40, which is capable of capturing huge amounts of data in a relatively short amount of time. We drove this around Singapore for a week, in 9 different areas, and captured a whole lot of data, and later processed that, of course, into 3D underground utility data maps. This was the final location, of course, chosen for obvious photo ops that it would generate. And in the meantime, although it was not necessarily our mandate to do so, we opened ourselves up to whatever was coming from the technology developments, but also from the community, from the local providers, and organized showcases, documented some of the different technologies that we believe could also play a part in utility mapping in Singapore. So on a very high level, I will share some of the recommendations that we gave. So basically what we found out is, of course, that the quality of data right now is not good enough for what we think is necessary to support Singapore's ambitions in the near future. Through 2 main strategies. One is the establishment of what we call a central map, a national map, where all the utility information is consolidated in one place, fully 3D, including data management capabilities. And to feed reliable data into that map, we propose a national mapping strategy, but also capitalizing on other opportunities. All those trial trenches that we dig over and over again to verify the location of utilities that we have on our paper maps. Can't we use that to capture maybe a single point of a utility and use that to make the quality and accuracy of that data better? And with phase 2, which we just started, of course, we aim to lay the foundations of that ecosystem that we propose. Proposing to undertake various actions in the project over the next little bit less than 2 years. Developing a framework for legislation and governance, a prototype map platform, reviewing and extending surveying standards in Singapore so we can cover more and different surveying and mapping scenarios, developing a training and education framework. Maybe we need a different kind of surveyor depending on the type of technology. We need to ensure that they are, of course, trained and skilled and equipped to do that work properly. And yes, run that community of practice, which we are now, of course, starting to fulfill that target. I think for me personally, the most valuable insights were always the ones where I talked to a surveyor or to a certain government agency, because you learn a lot about the reality, and the reality is often not exactly what is on paper.
So communication, planning, and construction are the 3 biggest areas where 3D adds a lot of benefit. The first is communicating with the people in Rotterdam, because 2D maps are very often very abstract and hardly to understand for people who aren't used working with maps. So a 3D map is a more recognizable picture of our city. That's one. And following that, our planning department, whether it's urban planning or green planning or maintenance planning above or below ground, plans get better when they are done in 3D, because it resembles reality far better than a 2D map. And the third development area are our own colleagues who work in the engineering department, who make the construction plans, the construction models. And they save with every plan they make at least a day, because they don't have to create a 3D environment. They can just select it and download it. and based on the area, it can be even more. And with every added source, their starting time gets faster, so they don't have to spend as much time in creating a 3D environment. They just can download it because it's available for them. At this moment, it is one central database which is owned and managed by the municipality, but we are looking uh, also to include streaming data. So we can share data from our database to the city model from another municipality or a nationwide data source to be included in our viewer without the need to copy the data into our database. So in general, at this moment, yes, all the data is stored in a database owned by the municipality of Rotterdam. And we want to include nationwide data sets through streaming data.
High fees. That's the main the main complaint that utility owners have. They don't complain about regulations or the processes of how we work, because they also have a stake in a good use of underground space. I mean, it's not only new pipes and cables that undergo the or that have the benefit, but also existing underground infrastructures. When the way we work ensures that existing underground infrastructures are also better protected from, for example, damages. But the fees are the main complaint, and we of course are looking at ways to see how we can reduce those fees.
Yes, we want to have more interaction with people in Rotterdam when we are redesigning their living areas. For instance, the public space around their houses. At this moment, we just communicate, this is our plan, good luck. What we want to do is better communicate what we are doing and why we are doing things, because we often don't tell the people who live in a street why we think it's a good idea to add park benches or trees or remove them or whatever. And in the final step in this process, we are going to ask what people want in their street. What are the needs in their street? For instance, how smart is it to put extra trees in a street when there is a park nearby where they are happily going to? Sometimes we oversee how people are using their street. So we want to ask in a while what people want. So it's a form of structured data gathering from people.